What was the worst decision you saw someone else make? Story 1. Driving home from a family outing, we took a steep, winding mountain road. A car zoomed past us, windows down, with 4 teenagers hanging out, shouting and swerving. They vanished around a bend. About 10 minutes later, we encountered a scene where they had crashed, falling off a bridge into a rocky ravine. My mother, a trained first responder, rushed to assist. As she climbed down, the wreck exploded into flames. We could hear the popping of tires and the screams. Horrific, endless sounds. The car was wedged so tightly among the rocks that nobody could get near. Emergency crews arrived, but by then, there was very little left to save. We stood there for over an hour, helpless, watching the fire consume the vehicle. It's been more than 2 decades, and I still sometimes hear the echoes of that night. Those kids were only a few years older than me. They never had the chance to live out their lives. I don't dwell on it constantly, but every now and then, it resurfaces. Please drive responsibly. A few minutes of reckless fun can ruin everything. Not just for you, but for everyone who loves you. Story 2. Around the year 2000, my cousin landed a contract as a pitcher with a professional baseball team and received a $140,000 signing bonus. With a bright future and possible millions ahead of him, he made disastrous choices. Instead of investing wisely, he spent nearly the entire bonus on a loud, flashy car and an outrageous sound system. Shortly after, he impregnated a woman he barely knew while playing in the minor leagues. Things spiraled from there. He was introduced to methamphetamine and quickly lost everything. I also knew another talented player, drafted 18th overall by a major team, who ended up working at a gas station within 5 years. Watching people with so much potential throw it all away is gut-wrenching. Talent can only take you so far if poor decisions undermine everything. My cousin's story serves as a painful reminder that success requires not just skill, but discipline and wisdom too. He could have built a life many people dream about, but instead, he let fleeting pleasures and bad habits sabotage his future. Sometimes, the worst decisions are not made in a single moment, but through a series of reckless choices. Story 3. One of my oldest friends decided to marry a woman who struggled severely with mental illness. She battled depression, anxiety, and had frequent emotional outbursts, often taking her pain out verbally on him. Once they married, she insisted he cut ties with nearly everyone in his life, especially female friends. Despite the red flags, he remained loyal. They later had 2 children, a lively son and a quiet daughter. Tragically, she openly favored the daughter and treated the son with disdain. She refused any suggestions of therapy or counseling, believing she didn't need help. Watching from the sidelines, it was heartbreaking. I don't believe she's a bad person. Rather, she's someone deeply wounded who refuses support. However, their choice to bring children into such an unstable environment only magnified the problems. We often hope that love alone can fix things, but sometimes love without intervention or healing just prolongs the suffering. Her family and his should have intervened, but fear and denial kept them distant. Now, 2 innocent children are growing up in a household where they are learning all the wrong lessons about love, respect, and emotional health. I can only hope they find healing someday. Story 4. A colleague of a friend bought her first house and thought she scored a fantastic deal, getting $50,000 off the asking price. She was thrilled and couldn't stop talking about her good fortune. However, there was a catch. The house was crawling with termites. She wasn't tricked into the purchase. She knew about the infestation but believed it could be handled easily. Reality hit hard when contractors told her the wood structure was severely compromised and that treatment wouldn't be enough. Essentially, she ended up paying a hefty price just for the land underneath. She had to tear down the house and absorb tremendous loss while trying to rebuild. It's a classic case of being blinded by the appeal of a deal without fully understanding the consequences. Sometimes, when something seems too good to be true, it really is. Her excitement turned into regret quickly, and it became a cautionary tale among our circle. Always do thorough inspections, and never underestimate the hidden costs of a bargain. In the end, she spent far more than she ever saved, both in money and in peace of mind. Story 5. A friend of mine in his early 30s, with a stable job and no major responsibilities, decided to start using cocaine recreationally. He figured he could handle it because he was financially secure and had no children depending on him. I warned him that having disposable income would actually make the addiction harder to resist. He brushed it off. Fast forward almost a decade, and he's still stuck in the same place he was when he first started. No career advancement, no meaningful relationships, just existing in a loop of working enough to fund his habit and using the rest of his energy chasing the next high. It's painful to see someone with so much potential waste it chasing momentary euphoria. Addiction doesn't always destroy your life overnight. Sometimes it just freezes you in place, robbing you of years you'll never get back. I rarely see him now, and when I do, it's like talking to a ghost of who he used to be. It's a reminder that even small choices, when repeated, can lead to a tragic stagnation. Story 6. Back in high school, a girl I knew married her boyfriend the summer after junior year. They both dropped out shortly after tying the knot, hoping to build a life together. Less than a year into their marriage, they split up. While I try not to judge people who marry young, it was obvious from the start that they weren't ready for such a commitment. They made one impulsive decision after another, believing love alone would be enough to sustain them. Thankfully, they didn't have children, which made the breakup less complicated. Looking back, it was a case study in why rushing into major life decisions, especially at a young age, can have lasting consequences. The girl eventually went back to school and tried to rebuild her life, but it set her back years compared to where she could have been. Sometimes the heart wants what it wants, but that doesn't mean it's wise to listen without asking hard questions. Love needs a strong foundation, something they sadly didn't have. Story 7. My dad made a devastating choice in his 50s. After nearly 3 decades of marriage and raising 4 children, he left my mom for a woman he met online. She lived in Southeast Asia and promised a fresh start and youthful excitement. He sold his house, liquidated his retirement savings, and moved across the globe to be with her. Within a year, it became clear she had only been using him to secure a visa and bring her 2 teenage children into a better living situation. Eventually, she left him, taking whatever remained of his money. My dad, once a proud and stable man, ended up broke, living in a small rented room, estranged from his family. It's a cautionary tale about chasing illusions and ignoring the wisdom of slow, considered decisions. Heartbreak doesn't just happen to the young. Sometimes the most devastating choices come when people are desperate to reclaim lost youth or escape dissatisfaction. Watching my father's downfall was one of the most painful experiences of my life, and a reminder that no matter your age, impulsivity can cost you everything. Story 8. One afternoon, while I was riding a city bus, we were approaching a red light when a small pickup truck abruptly cut us off. The bus driver calmly muttered, "Brace yourselves, we're about to hit an idiot." Sure enough, the bus slammed into the truck, sending it careening into a nearby light pole. Thankfully, no one aboard the bus was seriously hurt, though a few passengers and the truck driver needed hospital care. The crash was intense. The metal groaned, glass shattered, and the air filled with the smell of burnt rubber. The truck was totaled, and the driver learned a painful lesson about aggressive driving. It's amazing how a single bad decision, made in a split second, can lead to chaos and injury. That day stayed with me as a vivid reminder. Always respect larger vehicles on the road. Buses, trucks, and other massive vehicles can't stop or maneuver like a small car can. Arrogance behind the wheel doesn't just endanger you, it risks lives all around you. Story 9. My grandfather, a strong man who survived 2 wars and personal tragedies, still wakes up screaming from one memory: a factory accident he witnessed as a young man. He worked in a metal plant where safety protocols were often ignored. One day, a group of workers decided to fool around near a giant vat of molten steel. They forgot to secure a crucial valve, and in an instant, a stream of molten metal erupted. 2 workers were covered instantly, and another fell into the vat trying to help. My grandfather saw it all. Despite surviving battlefield horrors, it's that single moment, the terror, the helplessness, the screams, that still haunts him. Trauma isn't always born from violence or war. Sometimes, it comes from witnessing preventable tragedies. He often told me that foolishness and carelessness were far deadlier than any enemy he faced in combat. Even now, well into his old age, he can't close his eyes without seeing the flash of that molten metal. Some wounds never heal, no matter how much time passes. Story 10. While studying at a local coffee shop, I overheard a conversation that made my heart sink. A middle-aged woman was enthusiastically pitching a young woman on what was clearly a multi-level marketing scheme involving beauty products. She spoke in glowing terms about business opportunities and premium starter kits that cost hundreds of dollars. The young woman, likely in her early 20s, looked hesitant but intrigued. I wanted so badly to step in, to warn her that she was about to be conned into buying overpriced inventory she might never sell. But the conversation ended before I could say anything. Watching someone get pulled into a financial trap, especially someone so young and hopeful, was heartbreaking. Pyramid schemes prey on trust and ambition, dangling the illusion of easy success. Most people lose money, time, and confidence, and often friendships too. That coffee shop encounter stayed with me. It's a reminder that not all predators look dangerous. Some wear friendly smiles and offer you a golden opportunity. Always read the fine print and never invest in something you don't fully understand. Story 11. A girl I knew in my hometown became pregnant at 17 by her much older boyfriend. He was around 34. Instead of considering options like finishing school or delaying marriage, she rushed into marrying him. Her reason for not taking precautions or considering abortion: her strict religious beliefs. Fast forward a decade, and she's utterly miserable, raising 3 daughters she resents, stuck in a toxic marriage with a man who, while flawed, genuinely loves his kids. Meanwhile, she indulges in wild partying and questionable behavior, but refuses to divorce him because of those same religious convictions. It's heartbreaking to watch her trapped by a series of choices she made so young, compounded by the pressures of dogma. Her husband, for all his faults, remains committed to their daughters, while she drifts further away from the family life she once embraced. It's a tragedy built not just on one mistake, but on layers of them, each decision made without fully grasping the long-term consequences. Sometimes it's not just about who's right or wrong, it's about how deeply early choices can shape or shatter a life. Story 12. A couple I knew panicked and sold their home after hearing rumors that the real estate market in their area was about to crash. They accepted a low offer, desperate to get out before prices supposedly tanked. Ironically, just months later, gentrification swept through the neighborhood, and property values skyrocketed. Their modest home tripled in value within 2 years. They had essentially given away a future fortune out of fear. It reminds me of stories from the stock market, where people sell at the bottom and miss the rally. Real estate, like many investments, rewards patience. Their story became a running joke among our group. "Don't panic, sell," became our motto. It's easy to judge from the outside, but fear is a powerful motivator. They thought they were protecting themselves, but instead, they locked in a massive loss. Sometimes the greatest risk is letting fear drive your decisions. If they had just waited, even reluctantly, they could have been sitting on a huge financial cushion today. Instead, they had to start over, bitter and full of regret. Story 13. There's a cautionary tale from a small town in Montana where a couple bought a charming property just before the 2008 crash. The wife hated living there and, determined to make the house feel more Vegas, painted the interior in outrageous neon colors. They attempted to sell the house for what they paid, around $500,000, but no buyers emerged. When the market collapsed, they panicked and ended up selling the home and 16 acres of beautiful land for just $120,000. They lost nearly everything. Ironically, the buyers were a couple who had long dreamed of owning that property. It took them nearly a year to repaint and restore the house to something livable, but today they thrive on that land. This disaster stemmed from impatience and poor taste, amplified by fear. The Las Vegas dream never materialized for the original owners, but their loss became someone else's happily ever after. It's a powerful reminder. Don't make hasty decisions based on temporary feelings. A little patience could have saved them hundreds of thousands, and a lot of heartache. Story 14. A friend of mine started dating a woman he met through an app. After only a few dates, she decided to quit her job and move into his apartment. Red flags were everywhere, but he ignored them. A few months later, he was confiding over drinks that her behavior had turned toxic, constant fights, emotional manipulation, threats of self-harm. He planned to break up with her until she announced she was pregnant. Feeling trapped, he proposed marriage. I don't see him often now, but the last time I did, he showed up at my place after an argument where she had slapped their toddler across the face. It's heartbreaking to watch someone you care about get slowly crushed by a relationship they knew was wrong from the start. Love, obligation, and guilt can be powerful chains. Sometimes the cost of manning up isn't just personal, it's generational. His child will now grow up in a volatile home because of choices made far too quickly. Story 15. A woman in our neighborhood lost custody of her children after years of drug abuse. She had 2 toddlers at the time, and her neglect was so severe that one day the police found the kids wandering naked down a busy street looking for food. She would sleep for hours, strung out, with the kids locked in a room. Eventually, the older child was placed with a relative, and the younger one was taken by state services. Shockingly, she became pregnant again shortly after losing custody. Her defense in court was baffling. If they cared about my son's well-being, why didn't they take the other one too? It showed a profound misunderstanding of her responsibilities as a parent. Addiction had completely eroded her ability to see reality. Watching from the sidelines was infuriating and heartbreaking. Those children deserved so much better. Her story is a brutal illustration of how substance abuse can destroy not just individuals but entire families. Story 16. When my stepbrother was driving through downtown Cincinnati years ago, he witnessed something horrifying. A man falling from the upper floors of an apartment building. At first, no one in the car believed him. They thought he was exaggerating. Turns out, the man had been showing off a dangerous stunt, balancing on the balcony railing, when he lost his footing. He plunged over 20 stories to his death. It was a terrible accident, but also a grim reminder about the dangers of impulsive risk-taking. The man had likely done this trick many times before, thinking himself invincible. Sadly, one small slip turned into a fatal mistake. My stepbrother still talks about that day sometimes. The surreal, slow-motion horror of seeing someone fall to their death. It's a haunting memory and a cautionary tale. No matter how skilled you think you are, some risks simply aren't worth taking. Story 17. My cousin's wedding was a grand affair, costing nearly $90,000, lavish decorations, a huge venue, and a guest list a mile long. Her grandfather had offered to buy them a house instead, but she preferred a dream wedding. Less than a year later, the marriage fell apart. The whole thing had been more about appearances than partnership. She wanted the perfect day to impress her sorority sisters, not a strong foundation for a lifetime together. Now, she's back living with her parents, while her ex is trying to piece his life back together. Meanwhile, the money that could have secured their future evaporated in a single day of celebration. It's an old lesson. Weddings are one day, marriages are supposed to be forever. Sometimes, chasing the fantasy leaves you worse off than if you'd stayed grounded. Her story still circulates in family conversations as a warning. Don't trade real stability for fleeting glamour. Story 18. I had a friend in high school who was unbelievably smart and charismatic. After I graduated, I ran into him a year later. He had dropped out of school, moved in with his girlfriend, and was working part-time at a gas station to support their newborn. It was heartbreaking because he had so much potential. One bad decision, a relationship he wasn't ready for, changed the trajectory of his entire life. I haven't heard from him in years, and I often wonder what became of him. Life can be incredibly unforgiving when you're young and impulsive. He was the kind of person who could have gone far, but he got trapped in responsibilities he wasn't prepared for. His story is a reminder that potential alone isn't enough. You have to protect it, nurture it, and sometimes make the hard choice to walk away from the wrong path, even if it's difficult. Story 19. About a year ago, my aunt suddenly quit her stable job without warning. She fell into heavy drinking almost immediately, spending her days in a chair with a bottle in hand. It didn't take long for her kids to suffer. Neglect, missed meals, emotional outbursts. Eventually, my other aunt took custody of the children. Meanwhile, the once proud woman continued her descent, ending up homeless and involved with a much younger man who mistreats her. She's now practically unreachable. We suspect a mental health crisis triggered her downfall, but the cause remains unclear. Watching her spiral has been excruciating for the whole family. She missed her mother's funeral, ignored countless attempts to reach out, and seems lost in a haze of alcohol and poor choices. It's a brutal reminder that even strong, loving families can lose someone to addiction and mental illness when the support structures break down. Story 20. A close friend of mine consistently dated awful men, but one relationship stood out. She met a guy who immediately set off alarm bells for me. Something about him felt deeply wrong. Months later, she called me crying. She was pregnant, kicked out of her parents' house, and had discovered her boyfriend had a criminal record. He claimed he was sterile to avoid using protection. In reality, he just didn't care. They now have a child together, and she has caught him cheating multiple times, including using dating apps and posting explicit ads online. Watching her endure betrayal after betrayal was painful. She's tried to leave him several times, but always gets pulled back in by promises and manipulation. It's a sad cycle that seems to have no end. Her story is proof that ignoring early red flags can cost years of pain and missed opportunities for happiness. Story 21. I once stopped by a rundown house known for dealing weed. While waiting inside, I witnessed something that still makes my skin crawl. A woman, disheveled and clearly addicted, shot up a mix of heroin and cocaine. As soon as she finished, a stranger who had wandered in asked if he could use her dirty needle, and without hesitation, he did. It was horrifying. A little later, I remembered a speaker from my high school who had HIV and said people would knowingly share needles with him just to get high. Seeing it firsthand was far worse than hearing about it in a classroom. The desperation and indifference to life were staggering. Addiction doesn't just ruin your health. It erases your sense of self-preservation. That moment stuck with me as a brutal lesson. When addiction takes over, nothing, your dignity, your future, even your survival, seems to matter anymore. Story 22. After the birth of our son, my wife, who had been sober for nearly a decade, relapsed into heavy drinking. It started subtly, hidden bottles in the closet, excuses for erratic behavior. Within months, she blamed me for all her emotional struggles and asked for a separation, which quickly turned into divorce proceedings. Watching someone you love unravel is gut-wrenching. I fear that as her drinking worsens, she'll eventually lose custody of our child. I tried everything: therapy, support groups, interventions, but some battles must be fought alone. Addiction doesn't just destroy the addict. It leaves collateral damage in its wake. I still hope she finds her way back someday, but at the moment, the future looks grim. Our son deserves better, and I'm doing everything I can to ensure he gets a stable, loving environment. This experience taught me that sometimes, loving someone means letting go and protecting yourself and your children first. Story 23. I once watched a couple trying to save their crumbling relationship by having a baby. Against all advice, they thought a child would solve their problems. Instead, it amplified every crack in their marriage. Within a year, they separated, leaving their daughter to grow up splitting weekends between two unhappy households. Worse, one parent often made snide comments about how they didn't want another child anyway, right in front of her. It was heartbreaking. Children aren't emotional band-aids. They deserve to be born into love, not used as desperate attempts to heal broken relationships. That little girl now carries the emotional burden of feeling unwanted, a weight no child should bear. Watching it unfold was a painful reminder. If a relationship isn't strong enough to stand on its own, adding the stress of parenthood will only hasten its collapse. Story 24. In my hometown, a shocking scandal erupted when the dean of students at a local high school got drunk at a strip club. He first behaved badly with the dancers, was asked to leave, but refused. Security even offered to pay for his cab home, but he wouldn't take it. Eventually, the police were called. Instead of being arrested, officers simply tried to escort him out, but he began shoving them. He ended up tossed, arrested for assault, and plastered across the evening news. He lost his job and his reputation overnight. What's so tragic is that he had multiple chances that night to walk away with dignity intact, but stubbornness and alcohol clouded his judgment. His story became a local legend, not for the scandal itself, but as a reminder how one bad night can undo decades of hard work and respect. Story 25. One of my cousins, struggling with drug addiction, tried to reconnect with our family. My grandmother generously paid rent and utilities for a small house to help her start fresh. Instead of turning her life around, she refused to get a legitimate job, racking up enormous bills and abusing my grandmother's kindness. When my legally blind grandmother visited to check on her, they wouldn't even open the door and called the police on her. Later, my cousin falsely accused several male relatives of abuse and scammed people online by pretending to be a friend of my mother. After years of giving her chance after chance, we finally cut her off. Drugs didn't just ruin her life. They poisoned her relationships and destroyed any trust or goodwill she had left. Watching someone weaponize family loyalty for personal gain was one of the saddest things I have ever seen. Story 26. In 1975, my father inherited $100,000, a small fortune at the time. His brother proposed they use the money to start a golf cart business in a coastal town where golf tourism was booming. Dad thought it was too risky and instead bought a modest house. Meanwhile, his brother launched the business and, over the next 30 years, became one of the largest suppliers in the region. He eventually sold the company for over $5 million. My father still kicks himself over that missed opportunity. While owning a home was a safe choice, sometimes taking a calculated risk can change your life in ways you can't imagine. It's not about regretting being cautious. It's about recognizing that fear can sometimes cost you as much as recklessness. Every time we visit that coastal town, Dad winces a little, thinking about what could have been. Story 27. A friend of mine, a bright and sweet young woman, began struggling with prescription drug abuse. She juggled Adderall, Tramadol, Zoloft, and other medications, often mixing them dangerously. I once planned to sit down and talk to her, to urge her to get help, but when the time came, she brought a friend, and I chickened out. 3 days later, she got into a terrible car accident. She had all her pill bottles scattered across the car, and another driver was seriously injured. She lost her job, her confidence, and now faces possible jail time. I still wonder if speaking up earlier might have made a difference. Watching her spiral downward has been heartbreaking. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that matter most, and I'll always regret not having the courage to have that talk when it could have counted. Story 28. While traveling in New Zealand, I met a girl from Germany during a weekend trip. We clicked instantly, and she ended up staying in my hotel room for almost a week. When it came time for her to leave, I genuinely considered abandoning my plans and following her across the world. It reminded me of a friend who once stayed in a foreign country after meeting someone at a wedding, giving up his job, stability, and plans to stay with her. Against all odds, they're engaged now. Still, it was a huge gamble. Love can make you reckless, and sometimes it works out, but often it doesn't. I'm still weighing my options, but hearing about someone else's success doesn't make the decision any less risky. It's a dangerous mix of romance and impulsivity. Sometimes, you have to wonder if you're chasing a beautiful dream or setting yourself up for heartbreak. Story 29. An old friend of mine had been dating her boyfriend for barely 2 months when she got his initials tattooed on her wrist. Predictably, things went downhill. He dropped out of school, became increasingly violent, and during an argument even broke down a door to get to her. Eventually, she left him and had the tattoo lasered off. It's one of those classic cautionary tales, making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. Getting a tattoo is personal and emotional, but when tied to another person, especially someone you barely know, it's a gamble. Watching her go through the painful removal process, both physically and emotionally, was tough. Love can be blinding, especially when you're young, but nothing good comes from branding yourself with someone else's name before you even know if they're worth it. Story 30. When I was in college, I dated a girl who seemed sweet at first. One night, during an argument, she broke a piece of glass and carved my initials into her wrist right in front of me. She then begged me to do the same. Horrified, I knew right away I had to leave. Emotional instability can escalate fast, and seeing it manifest so violently was terrifying. I left that night and never looked back. At the time, I felt guilty, wondering if I had abandoned her when she needed help. But looking back, I realized that you can't save someone who refuses to save themselves. Love doesn't mean sacrificing your safety or sanity. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both parties is to walk away before things spiral even further. That experience taught me a hard but vital lesson about boundaries. Story 31. My cousin's mother, technically my great-aunt, made a disastrous series of decisions that led to tragedy. Before finalizing her divorce, she started seeing another man. Tensions rose quickly, and one evening, a confrontation between her estranged husband and new boyfriend turned deadly. The boyfriend pulled out a gun and shot her husband in the back of the head, killing him instantly. The shooter didn't flee. He calmly placed the weapon on his car and waited for the police. He tried to claim self-defense, but the evidence made it clear he had fired while the victim was walking away. Her husband had been one of the kindest, most genuine people you'd ever meet. To this day, I can't fully understand what went so wrong between them. It's a brutal reminder that reckless relationships, and the emotions they stir, can escalate into irreversible consequences. One impulsive decision, one volatile situation, and a good man lost his life. Our entire family was rocked by the event, and the scars from that night have never fully healed. Story 32. While working in hospice care, I encountered one of the worst cases of patient neglect I'd ever seen. We were caring for a 103-year-old woman who was dying painfully. Her medical power of attorney, a flight attendant, refused to authorize comfort medications. His reasoning, she can't talk, so she must not be in pain. Despite 2 doctors pleading with him, he stubbornly insisted on withholding relief. We couldn't legally override him. The best we could offer was a poorly absorbing Motrin suppository. We watched helplessly as she moaned and thrashed for hours, trapped in a body shutting down without dignity or peace. That experience left a permanent mark on me. Most deaths in hospice involve compassion and grace, but this was sheer cruelty, born out of ignorance or selfishness. I still think about her sometimes, and about how even at the end of life, bad decision-makers can steal away a person's final moments of comfort. It taught me that choosing the right person for your medical proxy is more important than most people realize. Story 33. During my second year of college, I had a critical final exam that would determine whether I could stay in my major. I hadn't attended class much and was woefully unprepared. Desperate, I got a Vyvanse pill from a friend, thinking it would help me cram the night before. Instead, I got hyper-focused on playing FIFA. I told myself I'd study after losing one match, but I kept winning over and over. By the time I finally looked at the clock, it was 5:30 a.m. I had played nearly 30 games and barely touched my notes. Exhausted, I tried to study but crashed from the Vyvanse and didn't retain anything. I stumbled into the exam on 2 hours of sleep and completely bombed it. As a result, I failed the class and had to change my major. It's one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made, risking my future for a night of meaningless video game victories. It's funny now, but it was devastating at the time. That experience taught me that shortcuts and cramming rarely pay off, and that sometimes discipline matters more than talent or intelligence. Story 34. At my old workplace, one of my coworkers was planning to propose to his girlfriend. He put a beautiful 3/4 carat solitaire ring on layaway, wanting everything to be perfect. Unfortunately, his girlfriend snooped around, found out about the ring, and canceled the layaway, calling it ugly and saying she deserved a much bigger diamond. Humiliated but determined, he put an even larger ring on layaway to please her. Over the next 5 months, she constantly belittled him at work, bragging about how she made him cry and how much better she deserved. His parents openly disapproved of her, but he proposed anyway. The last I heard, they moved closer to his family so he could work for his father. Given how she treated him and his family, I can only imagine how miserable things must be. Watching it unfold was agonizing. He was a good guy who convinced himself she would change once they were married. Instead, he set himself up for a lifetime of emotional abuse. It's a painful lesson. Love should lift you up, not tear you down. Story 35. When I was 15, my best friend's older brother died by a self-attack. He had always been the golden boy, athletic, charming, and seemingly invincible. None of us saw it coming. One night, after a normal dinner with his family, he went to his room, closed the door, and never came out. My friend found him the next morning. The shock shattered their family. His mother stopped speaking for months. His father took to drinking quietly on the porch every evening, staring at nothing. My friend, once vibrant and full of jokes, became a shadow. We were just kids, and none of us knew how to help. I remember sitting with him in silence for hours, feeling utterly helpless. It taught me early on that the brightest smiles often hide the deepest wounds. Mental health struggles aren't always visible, and sometimes even love isn't enough to pull someone back from the edge. His death left a permanent scar on all of us. A reminder to check on our strong friends, to listen harder, and to never assume someone's fine just because they seem okay. Story 36. My uncle battled cancer for 6 brutal years. At first, he fought with everything he had: chemo, surgeries, experimental treatments. There were moments of hope, tiny remissions that felt like miracles. But it always came back, stronger, more vicious. In his final year, he made the decision to stop all treatments. He wanted to live, not just survive. I remember the first time he said it out loud. It broke my aunt's heart. She begged him to try one more therapy. His kids cried, but he stayed firm. Watching him embrace death with such quiet courage was devastating and beautiful at the same time. He spent his last months traveling, recording messages for his children, and making peace with everyone he loved. When he passed, it wasn't a surprise, but it left a silence so heavy we could hardly breathe. His death taught me something no success story ever could. Sometimes bravery isn't fighting endlessly. Sometimes it's knowing when it's time to let go. And sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone we love is to respect their choice to say goodbye. Story 37. One of my childhood friends grew up in a turbulent home. Her parents fought constantly, shouting matches, broken dishes, slammed doors. We'd often sit on the porch at night as she cried quietly, pretending it didn't bother her. When she turned 18, she married the first boy who promised her peace. He turned out to be just as violent as her father. Within a year, her eye was blackened, her spirit cracked. She moved back home, only to face the same chaos she thought she had escaped. I watched her cycle through relationships, each time hoping for rescue, each time ending up more broken. It's a cruel irony, how people raised in dysfunction often seek comfort in the same pain they know best. She deserved better, but survival mode doesn't teach you how to recognize safe love. It teaches you to endure. Last I heard, she was finally living alone, working on herself. Healing isn't linear, and it's messy, but it's possible. Watching her journey taught me that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is break a cycle they were born into. Story 38. A boy I knew in high school had dreams of being a musician. He would bring his guitar everywhere, scribbling lyrics into battered notebooks. He wasn't the best student, but when he played, you could see the raw magic in him. After graduation, life hit hard. His parents divorced, money got tight, and college was out of reach. He tried to make it work. Open mics, gigs at grimy bars, but the constant struggle wore him down. One night, he got behind the wheel drunk after a failed audition. He crashed into a tree and spent months in the hospital. His wrist, the one he used to strum, was shattered beyond full repair. He never played the same again. Now, he works a job he hates, barely mentioning music. Sometimes, I'll see him at a local bar, tapping along to the beat with a distant look in his eyes. Dreams don't always die in grand explosions. Sometimes they just whimper out under the weight of bad luck and worse decisions. His story haunts me because it reminds me how fragile hope can be, and how easily it can slip through your fingers. Story 39. My neighbor growing up was a vibrant woman in her 40s, always gardening, always smiling. One autumn, She was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. At first, it was small things, forgetting appointments, losing her keys. Then bigger things, wandering the neighborhood, calling her children by the wrong names. Her decline was swift and cruel. Watching her husband, a stoic man who had been her rock, crumble under the weight of caregiving was heartbreaking. He tried to keep her at home as long as he could, but there came a day when she looked at him with total fear in her eyes, not recognizing him at all. That was the day he admitted her to care. He visited every day, reading her favorite books, bringing her flowers, though she rarely knew who he was. Alzheimer's doesn't just steal memories. It erases identities, relationships, entire lifetimes of love. When she finally passed, the grief was strange, almost a relief mixed with unbearable sadness. Her story taught me that sometimes love isn't glamorous. Sometimes, it's showing up every day even when the person you love no longer knows your name. Story 39. One summer, my cousin disappeared for 3 days. When he came back, skinny and bruised, we learned he had overdosed and been dumped by so-called friends outside a hospital. He had been using heroin for months, hiding it well under jokes and fake smiles. His parents were shattered. They had no idea. Addiction doesn't just destroy the user. It shatters families, friendships, communities. He went to rehab, relapsed, went again. Some days he would call, full of hope, making plans for a better future. Other days, he vanished into that dark world again. Watching someone you love battle addiction is like watching them drown while standing on the shore, unable to reach them. It's a helpless, brutal feeling. Last I heard, he was clean for almost a year, working at a community center helping others. But every time my phone rings late at night, a part of me still flinches. His story is a reminder that recovery is never a straight line, and sometimes survival itself is a victory. Story 40. When I was 10, my younger sister was diagnosed with leukemia. Childhood cancer is a thief. It steals normalcy, innocence, even entire futures. Our family lived at the hospital for months. I remember the beeps of machines, the smell of antiseptic, the way my parents' faces aged years in a matter of days. My sister, though, was incredible. Even when she lost her hair and grew too weak to walk, she smiled, told jokes, and made the nurses laugh. She fought like a warrior. After 2 years of brutal treatments, she went into remission. We celebrated like it was a second birthday. But even now, years later, the shadow of that time lingers. Every fever, every cough, brings a jolt of panic. Her experience taught me that life is unbearably fragile, and that strength often comes from the smallest bodies. She's alive today, but cancer left its fingerprints on all of us. Gratitude, fear, resilience, they're all mixed together now, inseparable. Story 41. A girl I dated in college struggled with an eating disorder, though I didn't realize it at first. She was beautiful, vibrant, full of life, but there were warning signs: refusing meals, obsessively counting calories, disappearing after dinner. The first time I caught her purging, she broke down, sobbing in the bathroom. I tried to help, but I was naive, thinking love alone could heal her. It doesn't work that way. Eating disorders are insidious and complex, tied to control, trauma, self-worth. She needed professional help, not a boyfriend trying to fix things with compliments and encouragement. Eventually, we broke up. She needed space to heal, and I wasn't equipped to walk that road with her. I've seen her since, stronger, healthier, but still fighting. Her story taught me that loving someone means recognizing when you can't save them, and that real strength sometimes lies in stepping back, not holding on tighter. Story 42. My cousin fostered a boy who had been in and out of the system since infancy. When he arrived, he was 6 years old, silent, and terrified of everything. He flinched at sudden movements and barely spoke. At night, he would cry himself to sleep. Slowly, with patience and love, he began to trust. He learned to ride a bike, to read bedtime stories, to laugh without fear. But trauma leaves deep scars. He would sometimes shut down without warning, trapped in memories too painful to voice. Watching my cousin parent him was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Love didn't magically erase the pain. It just gave him a place to land when the memories came. Eventually, they finalized the adoption. At the ceremony, he clung to her so tightly, as if afraid she might vanish too. His story taught me that healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about building something stronger in spite of it. Story 43. A man in my old neighborhood lost his wife in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. They had been married less than 2 years. One moment they were driving home from dinner, laughing about something small and stupid. The next, his entire world was gone. Grief hollowed him out. For months, he wandered the streets at night, lost in memories. He refused to sell their house, leaving her clothes in the closet, her shoes by the door. Time didn't heal him the way people promised. It just stretched the pain thinner, made it quieter but no less present. Watching him taught me that some losses don't get easier. They simply become part of you, stitched into the fabric of who you are. And sometimes, it's okay if you never fully move on. Some loves are too deep to disappear. Story 44. Growing up, my brother and I were inseparable. When he turned 18, he enlisted in the military, eager to find purpose. He came back 3 years later, but he wasn't the same. His eyes, once full of mischief, looked hollow. Loud noises made him flinch. Certain smells sent him spiraling. We tried to welcome him back like nothing had changed, but everything had. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the silence. It was the realization that the person we loved was still there, buried under layers of pain. He eventually agreed to therapy, but progress came slow. Some days, he's almost himself again. Other days, he disappears into his own mind. Watching him struggle taught me that wounds aren't always visible and that healing isn't about becoming who you were. It's about finding a way to live with who you've become. Story 45. My grandmother lost her first child when he was just a few months old. She never spoke about it openly, but sometimes, late at night, I would hear her crying softly in the living room. She kept his baby shoes in a small wooden box tucked away in a drawer. One day, when I asked her about them, she simply said, "Some grief never leaves you. It just becomes part of who you are." It wasn't bitterness in her voice. It was acceptance woven with sorrow. She lived a long, rich life, raising children, traveling the world, but a part of her always belonged to the son she lost. Her quiet strength in carrying that invisible burden taught me more about resilience than any grand speech ever could. Love, even when it ends in grief, remains. Story 46. In college, I tutored a girl who had just aged out of the foster care system. She was brilliant, sharp, quick-witted, but she wore her trauma like armor. She distrusted kindness, flinched at compliments, and expected betrayal at every turn. Over the semester, we built a tentative friendship. One evening, while studying, she admitted she didn't believe she'd live past 25. It wasn't said dramatically. It was just a fact in her mind. That broke something in me. No one should carry that kind of hopelessness so young. She taught me that survival isn't just about breathing. It's about believing you deserve more than just endurance. Last I heard, she was working at a nonprofit helping other kids like her. She proved to herself and to me that hope, though fragile, can be built from the ruins. Story 47. My father's best friend died of a heart attack while playing catch with his son. He was only 42. One minute he was laughing. The next he collapsed. Watching a family unravel in the face of sudden loss is unlike anything else. His wife would sit on their porch every evening, staring out at the empty driveway as if willing him to come back. His son stopped speaking for nearly 6 months, retreating into a shell of silence. Loss doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it's instant, leaving no time for goodbyes, no space for preparation. Their family found a way to survive, but the absence hung over them like a permanent shadow. It taught me to say the things you want to say today. You may not get another chance.